Okay, so we saw that we have 5 targets drawn, right? So what we said at the beginning of this thing was we're going to get each of those targets, right? So that when I click on one of them, it's going to get bigger, all right? It's maybe not the most fun game I've ever seen, but, you know, what are you going to do? You got about a half an hour. You got to make a game, okay? What do we want to do here? Well, we've got to figure out a couple things, right? We want the target to be able to grow, okay? We want the world, basically the frame, the game, to be able to register getting clicked, okay? And then what we want to do is we want to basically see which target got clicked once we register that something got clicked. Does that idea make sense? Okay, so it's like something got clicked. Was it one of these targets? And if it was a target, tell it to grow. All right, so we're going to go back to the target class now. And inside the target class, we're going to set this thing up so that it can do a couple extra things. Right now, all it can do is draw and be constructed. Okay, next thing we want this thing to be able to do is grow. Okay, so to make this thing grow, we're going to go ahead and say it has a public void grow method. That's something that I can tell it to do. Okay? Which of these variables, x, y, radius, or color, which of these variables should change when I tell it to grow? The radius, right? And what should happen to the radius? Should get bigger. So I want to go in here and say radius now equals whatever radius was plus some value. Okay? So 10 pixels is a pretty good value. We're going to be able to see that pretty easily. So that's the idea. This method then is used to change the property of that object. Okay? So the only way that I can tell this thing to grow is if it gets selected. So I'm going to give you guys another method here, and I'm basically going to talk my way through it, and it's going to be kind of brand new for you guys. So just kind of bear with me for a second, all right? So we're going to go public, and then Boolean, and then selected. Okay? So to determine whether this thing got selected, we're going to do some math, all right? So let's think about this for a second, all right? If my pen is the mouse pointer and I'm trying to select this thing, okay, am I selecting it right now? No. Am I selecting it now? 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 Okay? So we get the idea here that in order to select this thing, the mouse pointer has to be basically inside of it. Okay? And we need to do some math to figure out what that means. How do I determine whether I'm inside of it or not? Okay? The things that we know about this thing are, we know its position. It has an X and a Y. Okay? And we know its radius. We also know its color, but does the color of it help us determine whether I've clicked it or not? That's a good question. So if there's a way to say, like, you clicked the color yellow, then yeah, it does. It would be helpful, right? But I don't know of a way of doing that. So, I guess that's not going to help us very much. Okay? So this is a tough question, okay? I think this is a really tough question. How can I use X, Y, and radius to tell me that this point does select it, but this point doesn't, right? This point does select it, this point doesn't. Yeah. Okay, so the suggestion was take your x-coordinate, subtract the radius from it, take your x-coordinate, add the radius to it, And you basically have these lines as thresholds for saying that we selected the target. Okay? Do the same thing for y. Y minus the radius would bring you up here. Y plus the radius would bring you down there. And so you're saying if I click inside of this box, anywhere inside of that box, we're going to say that we selected that thing. Okay? That's a good answer. It's not a perfect answer, right? Because this gives us a little bit of like error over here, over here, over here, and over here. But maybe we don't care about that error. All right? So there's a better way of doing this, but we're going to go with your way of doing it because I just think it's great that you came up with it. Okay? So in order for this thing to tell us whether it's selected, we need to know where we clicked. Okay? We know X and Y, we know the radius already, but we don't know where the mouse got clicked. So in here we create parameters for those things. Clicked X and clicked Y. And then in here what I'm going to do is say if X minus radius is less than clicked X and clicked X is less than X plus radius, then we're going to check if the same sort of thing is true for the Y. So if Y minus radius is less than clicked Y and clicked Y is less than Y plus the radius. Yep. Okay. So if both of those ifs are true, or basically if all four of those conditions are true, so we're saying if you're within the bounds of the radius in the x coordinate, then check if you're within the bounds of the radius in the y coordinate, and if both of those things are true, then we're going to return true. All right? If not, we're going to return false. So we're going to basically give an answer. Were you selected? Yes, true, I was selected. Were you selected? No, false, I was not selected. Okay? So like I said, this is kind of brand new for you guys, so if you don't fully grasp it, it's not that big of a deal, but we're going to be able to use it in our world now. Okay? So we're going to go over to the world. We're going to go over to target world. This is the last thing that we're going to do. This is going to make this thing work. Okay? So what we want target world to do is we want it to register that the mouse was clicked. So we're going to add a public void mouse clicked method. We've done that before. Mouse event needs to be imported. And basically what we want to do is we want to loop through all of the targets anytime the mouse is clicked. Check if one of the targets got clicked, and if it was clicked or if it was selected, then we want to tell that one to grow. Okay? So what we need to know is where the mouse was clicked. Okay? So we're going to go int x equals mouse dot get x. Okay, int y equals mouse dot get y. So that should be familiar to you. Then we want to loop through all of the targets. So we need an index starting at 0. While that index is less than targets.length, we're going to check if a particular target got selected. So we want to check if targets at index dot selected, and then we're going to tell it X and Y where the mouse got clicked. Oops. Okay. And then here we're saying if the target that was selected, then tell that target to grow. Inside of the loop, we want to make sure that the index is increased. And the last thing we want to do every time the mouse is clicked is repaint. Okay, so I know you guys are kind of catching up to me. I'm going to run this real quick just so that we can see it working. Okay. So here's my world. All right. I just want you to look up here real quick. Okay, so here's my green target. Okay, you guys see what's happening here? If I click out here, nothing happens. If I click in there, that one grows. Click in there, that one grows. Because of the way that we did it, we made that little box around it, right? So if I click right here, technically I'm really not selecting it, but it's going to think that I am. Okay, so it's not, like I said, it's not perfect. And if I get these things big and I go right there, right, then it's saying, yep, you selected both of us. Okay. So the whole point of this is we can make an object, we can define its properties, and then we can use that object inside of an array to make a bunch of them. Okay. And then I can do whatever I want with that object through one of these games. Okay.